Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're excited that you're joining us today for our webinar, Supporting Resiliency in Housing and Health Professionals. My name is Jen Elder. I'm the director of the Homeless and Housing Resource Center, and we are so excited to share this information with you today. We've been working hard with our partners at the National Council for Mental Wellbeing on some new resources that we really hope will help you in your work in this field. Next slide. So we'll start with just a quick disclaimer. We are funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, but the views and opinions expressed today don't necessarily reflect those of SAMHSA or HHS. Next slide. Just a couple quick housekeeping items from me. We do have American Sign Language interpretation and live transcription today. If you're having any technical difficulties, please reach out to us. You can reach out to us via email or via the Q&A feature in Zoom, and we will do our best to help you troubleshoot. Next slide. With our attendees today, the participant lines are muted and the chat feature is disabled, but we really encourage you to submit your questions using the Q&A feature, your reactions, how you, your interaction with the presenters can all happen through that Q&A. We wanted to also remind you that next week there is an office hour, so any questions that we don't get to today will be really helpful for informing next week's event. The slides for today are available now on the HHRC website. We'll get that link to you in the chat and also in the Q&A if you'd like to download those and follow along. And we'll have a recording available in about 1 week. At the end, we'll share a link and a QR code for you to do a very short evaluation that'll redirect you to a certificate of participation upon completion. But if you have any issues with that link, just let us know. We'll make sure that you get what you need for your certificate. Next slide. All right, and so with that, I'm so excited for our partners from the National Council for Mental Wellbeing joining us today, Laura Leone and Elizabeth Burden. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Laura to get us started with today's conversation.
Yes, thank you so much, Jen, and thank you everyone for being here. We're really so excited to be here with you to just share and talk through how resiliency is so important in helping our wellness and well-being as we work with individuals. Today in the webinar, we are going to cover the rationale for self-care and resiliency skills among supervisors and supervisees. We will talk about how to recognize the ABCs of self-care and well-being. You'll learn more about what the ABCs are. And we're going to identify tools and resources to promote individual and organizational self-care and resiliency. As Jen mentioned, we are so excited that the information that we're sharing with you today is information highlighted from the new guide put out by HHRC for supervisors of housing and health professionals. And it's called Building Resiliency. So we're going to tell you more about it in a bit. But first, we want to start off with, why do we build resiliency? Why talk about this? What's the rationale behind it? So certainly we know that there are some consequences for individuals and organizations that work within people experiencing homelessness, housing insecurity, and healthcare professionals. And that, there are certainly strengths of housing and healthcare professionals that we see all the time: passion and compassion, determination, among many others. And these are some of the same qualities, though, that actually can put people at risk for secondary traumatic stress, for compassion fatigue, and for burnout. And there are various connected conditions that can help that can develop through occupational stress. And that's sort of this picture that you're seeing here on the slide is the connection between these three areas. There's a lot of research to support, especially even before the pandemic, and it's even exacerbated since the pandemic, to really highlight that You know, in several studies, anywhere around 33% of homeless service providers have post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. That 31%, have burnout or experience burnout, or anywhere from nearly half of all people in one particular study reported secondary traumatic stress. 23% experience compassion fatigue. So there's this interrelationship between secondary traumatic stress, compassion fatigue, and burnout. So to define each of them a little bit further, secondary traumatic stress is defined as a service-related secondary exposure to another person's trauma and the stressors of another's personal history through that exposure to intense energy, absorption of graphic details, and dealing with challenging behaviors. Compassion fatigue refers to the exhaustion that can affect helping professionals and caregivers over time. Compassion fatigue manifests as deep physical, emotional, and spiritual exhaustion. And then burnout is a process involving gradually increasing emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. It occurs when you feel overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and unable to meet constant demands. So secondary traumatic stress, burnout, and compassion fatigue have serious consequences for individuals and organizations. A multidimensional approach to prevention and intervention is essential, involving individual self-care, supportive supervision, and organizational wellness, all of which, again, we're going to be talking about today. So this need for multidimensional approach, as we highlight further, is that, again, that individual self-care, that supportive supervision, and organizational wellness. It is all built within the structure of the guide, which again is called Building Resiliency, a guide for supervisors of housing and health professionals. And the guide is designed to help supervisors specifically to identify approaches for the prevention and intervention of that secondary traumatic stress, compassion fatigue, and burnout among staff. It's also to enhance staff resiliency, support and to celebrate health and well-being, and to explore policies, procedures, and activities to promote organizational wellness and well-being. So we're happy to highlight some of the information found in the guide with you today. And as we move forward, we're happy to, again, answer any questions today and continue to answer questions next week if you join us again for our office hours.
So as Laura mentioned, there are the three elements: the individual, the supervisorial, and the organizational, that are a part of what is highlighted in the guide. And so we want to start with the individual, talking about self-care and well-being and some of the ABCs of that. Sometimes as individuals, we believe that we are too busy taking care of everyone else to worry about taking care of ourselves. But we know that like dipping water from a bucket without replenishing, eventually the bucket is empty if we don't take good self-care. So in an act of self-preservation, our body will force us to rest, often through physical, mental, or emotional illness, or physical illness, if you hear my cold. So self-care is not pampering at all. It's a necessity. So let's talk about what those ABCs are. ABC stands for awareness, balance, and connection. And so let's just take a minute to look at each of these. So the first, A, building your own awareness of your physical health, your mental health, and your relationship health. Building your awareness really starts with thinking about what self-care means to you. What do you need to know? What do you need to do to care for yourself, both personally and professionally? Because there's a professional element of self-care as well. How do you define self-care? What are the things that you expect or would like to include in your self-care? What's your sense of your own ability for self-care? What additional resources might you need? How have you cared for yourself in the past? What works for other people? So it's thinking through your own experiences, your thoughts and feelings, and identifying some resources for support. The B relates to balance. And that includes things like professional boundaries, coping with stress through at work, and including play and rest as a way of coping with stress, and building your own resilience. So where is the sweet spot? It's about finding the sweet spot where you can have a balance of personal and professional and include self-care in both realms. So for example, at work, self-care isn't always about taking a break, even though that might be important and getting up from your desk and doing some work. It's also, however, self-care at work is about finding balance in what you do, because different tasks require different energy and different focus. So finding a good mix of activities throughout our day or throughout the week can help with self-care, and even one small shift can make a difference. So for example, for me, I know that I need to write in the morning when my mind and my body are fresh, that I can do some other more mundane tasks like answering email or filing paperwork, or that for me is a later in the day activity that goes with the reduction of energy that I might feel across the day. So finding that balance, setting those boundaries. So for me, that also means setting boundaries so that my meetings tend to be clustered in one part of the day. I'm able to do that. And I've set that boundary with my colleagues so that other kinds and other blocks of time can be spent in thinking work at the time when thinking work works best for me. That's B, developing balance. C is creating connections. And so some of that boundary setting can also help with creating connections with colleagues. So what are the connections you have with yourself and others? What are the connections you have to the bigger perspective of your life and your work and the bigger picture of all of that? So in thinking about connections, some things you might consider include, how do you connect internally with your own thoughts, emotions, and what's happening internally with your body? What are your connections with others? We know that increasingly research tells us, and I think our COVID experience has reinforced, how vital meaningful connections are with other people for our overall health and well-being in our personal life and in our work life. Even though we may not be deep friends, if you will, with the people we work with, those collegial connections in person or virtually make a difference in our work-life balance. And so paying some attention to how we have and we build those meaningful connections and continue to build those meaningful connections in this continuing era of distributed work or remote work, if you will, continues to be important. How do you connect with colleagues or coworkers throughout the day in meaningful ways as a part of your self-care? So not just to work, but again, to establish connections, boundaries, understandings about the work. So awareness, balance, and connection, ABC. These are the building blocks of our own self-care. And if we can focus on all three, we can move toward enhancing our job and life satisfaction, building healthy support systems, and maintaining healthier practices for well-being. Next slide, please. And I think that's you, Laura.
Yeah, the next section is really about how do we promote self-care and resilience among supervisees. So from the perspective of a supervisor, what is it that we can do to promote resiliency in all of its core elements? This really, supervision is an opportunity to promote healthy working relationships, healthy boundaries, and opportunities for growth, as well as enhancing all of the ABCs that Liz just shared with you all. You know, staff self-care, or a lack thereof, impacts every area of work. Encouraging self-care is an important part of supervision, and it can happen in many ways, either formally or informally. So supervisors provide feedback, they help problem solve, they facilitate brainstorming, provide reassurance around things that are happening. They can offer new ideas and help reduce stress wherever possible. And so one of the many goals of supervision is helping staff to enhance their resiliency. So resiliency can be defined as the ability to adapt well to stress, adversity, trauma, or tragedy, or as the capability to cope successfully in the face of significant change, adversity, or risk. So everyone has resiliency, which is wonderful, and everyone has the capacity to develop resiliency further. So there, as you see on this slide, there are 7 core elements of resilience and skills within that can fall under each of these 7 areas, which can be taught and learned. So some of these core elements that you see here, so there's emotional regulation, so the ability to control our own emotions, attention, and thus our own behavior. There's impulse control, the ability to manage the expression of our feelings. Accurate identification, which is clarity on cause of adversity, hardship, or difficulty. There's self-efficacy, which is the sense that we can solve problems and succeed and sort of follow problem-solving skills and steps. There's reaching out, that drive to take on more challenges and opportunities and to connect and do more. And there's empathy, the ability to read others' behavior, understand their states, and to build relationships. And last, but certainly not least, is realistic optimism. So that positive and realistic outlook about the future. And thinking about each of these components, these are really opportunities of areas to dive in as a supervisor with a supervisee or supervisees, and really think about what are the areas of growth potential that your supervisees have. Where are the things that they're doing really well within these core elements that you can highlight and celebrate and really help facilitate, again, what's happening within supervision, again, formally and informally.
And so those elements that Laura is talking about really relate to strengths-based supervision, which is the framework that we see on this slide. Strengths-based supervision is a way to build resiliency among staff. And there are 3 general elements of strengths-based supervision. There's the supportive, there's the educative, and there's the administrative. All 3 can help to support employee resiliency and self-care in different ways. So for example, supportive supervision helps to foster high morale and satisfaction. Individuals have an opportunity to reflect on their work and to receive feedback along with validation and support. Supportive supervision helps to decrease job stress that might be interfering with work performance. It also nurtures conditions that encourage self-efficacy and success. In supportive supervision, you help your staff to achieve focus and direction, offer support around goal setting, problem solving, boundary setting, and make space for strategizing about self-care. Now, we've shown these as 3 discrete circles, and there's some overlap between them as well. Do know that there's interactions, obviously, between all of these kinds of supervision. So, for example, the space where supportive and educative supervision overlap is often where we see a lot of problem solving with our supervisees. Now, educative supervision ensures effective training and development. It includes providing regular space and time for supervision work, for teaching and modeling of skills, and for providing consistent opportunities for individuals to develop their knowledge, skills, and competencies. This type of supervision focuses on ensuring staff have all of the competencies and skills that they need to get their job done successfully. So training, coaching, professional development. It also includes processes for giving regular feedback to them, both positive and constructive feedback. It may also involve directly demonstrating and modeling self-care, or providing information on things like employee assistance programs or other resources that your staff might want to use when they might need some professional help in balancing work, in implementing those ABCs, if you will, of self-care. And then administrative supervision promotes the effective implementation of policies and procedures and the conformance to standards for high quality practice within your organization. So in addition to working with supervisees on their work and their practice, your administrative supervision also includes advocating for changes in organizational policy and practice to support effective and efficient work. That's that overlap between the administrative and supportive that you see there. And the overlap between administrative and educative is really focused on performance management. Are people meeting the goals and objectives that are set? Are they following the policies and procedures that are set? And if not, what are the challenges? What are the barriers in that? And what might need to be done to overcome those challenges and the barriers? So the role, if you will, of the supervisor in this is not only informing the team about the policies and procedures or changes in policies and procedures, but helping them to manage change and addressing any issues that might occur in keeping up with the administrative pieces, the policies and procedures that are a part of your organization. It also includes accountability, quality assurance, performance evaluation, all of which are important. Knowing how well I'm doing and where I stand can be an important part of my own self-care if it is provided in a way that is strengths-based and supportive. Lastly, administrative supervision includes resource monitoring and management, time management, caseload management to keep staff from being overburdened, which then can lead to stress, which then can lead to burnout and some of the other correlated elements of stressful work. So it's also important to remember that a good supervisor doesn't have to know everything about resiliency and self-care and all of these things that relate to supervision and strengths-based supervision, because supervision itself is also about seeking information, working with collaboratively with staff, the processes, and finding solutions together. And ultimately, it's also about role modeling self-care. So promoting organizational wellness. Supervision, as we just talked about it, strengths-based supervision is an opportunity for an organization to reinvest in its own workforce. It's an opportunity for you to spend time, if you are a supervisor, helping them to find their balance, their ABC sweet spot. But supervision is only one part of an organization's commitment to healthy, productive staff. Promoting organizational wellness is another key part. And so there are also organizational ABCs, if you will, that are also awareness, balance, and connection, but they show up slightly differently when we're talking about organizational wellness. Organizational ABCs. Organizational awareness starts with gaining clarity on the lived experience and values, the culture and the climate of your organization, and how well those elements support wellness or not. How does everyone in your organization, leadership, staff, and participants, experience your organization and its climate as well? Organizational balance relates to ensuring that the values, culture, and climate of your organization align with organizational wellness. A balanced organization is one in which the expectations for achieving purpose are clear and reasonable, and that connects back to that supportive supervision again. The climate is warm and welcoming. That relates to organizational policy and processes, from things from orientation to the regular check-ins to how the work is structured, as well as the culture being compassionate, which relates to really having appropriate listening and feedback loops, if you will, that allow individuals to reflect on and manage their work and their workflow in a way that helps with balance. And then organizational connection reflects the ways that the organization brings together the pieces into a common whole. It goes back to, in some respects, that individual ABC having the larger perspective, if you will, and the larger connection. The organizational connection helps me as an individual employee understand that common whole. It connects my role, my job, my tasks as an individual to the overarching purpose of the organization, the overarching mission and the work. But organizational connection also helps individuals become a team or become a group. So it fosters the relationships among colleagues and between departments. as well as to be able to ensure effective working together, if you will, effective collaboration. And finally, organizational connection relates to demonstrating how the organization's work furthers the field. And so we all know that there are times that we can get bogged down and very narrow in the focus on what our particular task is in that moment or in that day. And so organizational connection means organizations building ways that we have opportunities to pause, step back, and relate to how all of our contributions in our organization are furthering the work in the field, how they're making a difference, how they're making an impact in our communities. So all of that ABCs can help us to address and prevent employee burnout. And one of the ways we can do that, one of the ways that we can put the ABCs into practice in an organization is through what we're calling, what we call in the guide, an employee protection plan, which is a concrete way of aligning organizational policy and practice with what we know works to promote wellness, with tools and strategies to promote wellness. So for example, on the screen, we see one of the elements of an employee protection plan, which is fostering connections, commitment, and mutuality and cohesion. So for example, going back to that connection, there are things that we can do in organizational policy and practice, such as help staff to initiate friendly conversations, have the executive team initiating friendly conversations with staff on a regular basis about their work, about other things that aren't work. Meeting with your team regularly as a supervisor, both individually and as a group, and organizing some team building events. Some of this may be precede work, some of it may be optional after work, but it's ways of people getting to know one another in the workplace. And then lastly, as we've kind of already described, making work meaningful. So structuring jobs to include meaningful tasks, as well as to clarify how jobs and tasks support the organizational mission. Now we know that not every task and every job description is going to be 30,000 foot level meaningful. But I do think that in every job, we can structure things that are meaningful to the overarching mission and purpose of the organization. And that's what this particular part of the employee protection plan speaks to. There are 5 other elements that you'll be able to see in the guide that relate to the employee protection plan as well. They include creating a strengths-based environment and culture, being realistic, reasonable in our expectations while being attentive to results. So being realistic and reasonable doesn't mean not having expectations for results, but it is being realistic about them. Enhancing the structure and culture for balance and really paying some attention to that. And again, we all know how difficult many of these things are that we're talking about, that if they were easy in practice, we wouldn't necessarily have needed to write a self-care guide. And they can be challenging, but if we keep in mind that part of the goal, especially of us as supervision, as supervisors, is to try and help supervisees find balance, but it's also to help our managers and supervisors and leaders understand the structure and balance that needs to happen within the culture. 2 other elements of employee protection plan: equipping the team with the right tools and resources, and building trust and transparency. So while the executive leadership of an organization sets the policies and tone for organizational wellness, supervisors at all levels also play an important role in this employee protection plan. Again, helping the leadership to better understand task and workload challenges that your supervisees may be having, and the administrative and resource needs of frontline staff, as well as supervisors, you can routinely model the protection plan and the practices in your own work and in your work with supervisees. All of this can help to promote resilience, and Laura's going to talk with us a little bit about promoting resilience through trauma-informed approaches.
Yes, thank you, Liz. Excuse me. So, as Liz was talking about all of these aspects, it really comes down to being a trauma-informed organization, right? There are also things that organizations can do to address and mitigate secondary traumatic stress and compassion fatigue. Like individuals, organizations can be resilient and they can build resiliency. So organizational resilience is the ability of an organization to anticipate, to prepare for it, respond, and adapt to incremental change and sudden disruptions to survive and prosper. It is grounded in a learning culture that supports positive adjustment and adaptation. And the key characteristics of resilient organizations are summarized here on the slide. They're innovative, they're agile, secure, robust, responsible, and trusted. And so, we know trauma has impacts on many different levels. It affects the way in which individuals look at and interpret the world and shapes our beliefs and our identity. Program participants are not the only ones who experience trauma, and which can be either primary or secondary. Many times, staff have their own traumatic histories, which can create situations where they seek to avoid re-experiencing their own emotions or respond personally to others' emotional states, or perceive the behavior of others as a personal threat or provoking of them. So a trauma-informed organization acknowledges all of this. They acknowledge the widespread impact of trauma, recognizes and addresses the signs and symptoms of trauma, and responds by integrating knowledge of trauma into its policies, procedures, and practices. And this is not just a checklist of things to be, trauma-informed and then we're done. It really means incorporating and understanding all of the intricacies of trauma or adverse experiences and its effects on the culture of an organization. So trauma-informed organizations support hope and healing, and they promote overall community wellness. They see themselves as part of their community and therefore extend the principles for working in community to their own staff as members of the community. So overall, a trauma-informed organization includes a safe, calm, and secure environment with supportive care for clients and staff. And there's a system-wide understanding of the trauma prevalence, impact, and trauma-informed care. So there's cultural competency and humility. There's consumer voice, choice, and advocacy, access to recovery-oriented, consumer-driven, trauma-specific services, and above all, there are healing, hopeful, honest, and trusting relationships between staff and leadership, and staff and clients. Healing happens in relationship. So trauma-informed principles help to build organizational resilience and a compassionate organizational culture. Again, all of this information and so much more is in the guide that we're talking about today, and which we're happy to share a link to in the chat. We also want to highlight that there is an infographic as well that is one of the many resources connected to this guide that is, again, focusing on promoting self-care and resilience among supervisees. So we'll go ahead and share that in the chat. Thank you.
So in sum, we really are looking at supervisors and organizations as being entities that provide feedback and reassurance, that offer new ideas and facilitate and brainstorm really ways of working that can be balanced, that help to problem solve and that help to reduce stress while still achieving mission and goals. We've invited two staff people to give a perspective from the field on how they do those things as well as others around organizational wellness. With us today are Peggy Hutchison and Denise Lopez from the Primavera Foundation in Tucson, Arizona. Peggy Hutchison serves as the Chief Executive Officer of Primavera Foundation, which is a chartered NeighborWorks or America Community Development Organization. Its mission is to provide pathways out of poverty through safe, affordable housing, workforce development, and neighborhood revitalization. Peggy has worked in the community development and economic justice fields in the United States, Latin America, and the Caribbean, Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East for more than 25 years. And Denise Lopez is a program manager for Project Action for Veterans, Supportive Services for Veteran Families program with the Primavera Foundation. This program is funded by the Department of Veteran Affairs with the goal of ending veteran homelessness. The program not only houses veterans in Pima County, but also works with veterans in rural Cochise, Greenlee, Graham, and Santa Cruz counties, which as an Arizonan, I can attest to is a very large service area. And so welcome, Peggy and Denise. And I think we were going to start before we jumped into questions with maybe Peggy, you sharing a little bit more about the work of Primavera.
Sure. Hello, everyone. And it's such a privilege to join you all and reflect on, the challenges of our time and doing this really, really critical and hard work and the opportunity to do it. So Primavera, just very briefly, was founded by activists in the community in Tucson in 1983, activists who were outraged by the growing numbers of folks experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. And this was under the Reagan administration. And I can attest, I was alive in those years, so I can tell you that what we saw was the government was shrinking from its responsibility. There was not enough support for housing, job training, behavioral health services, education, on and on and on. And so these activists said, this is wrong. We're going to protest and we're going to start trying to address it and create programs in the community, starting with a soup kitchen and then a men's shelter. And now we've grown. We have 7 lines of business, multiple programs and properties, everywhere from drop-in coordinated intake services to shelters, rapid rehousing, eviction prevention, utility assistance, rental housing portfolio, also employment programs. So we have a temp to hire ethical day labor program, and home ownership and financial empowerment, community building and engagement, neighborhood revitalization, which includes urban planning, or community neighborhood planning, as well as developing housing as a strategy for revitalizing disinvested neighborhoods. We are spread out in over 18 locations, and we have a staff upwards of 100 when you include our temp to hire staffing service. So I want to say also what's really, really great about Primavera is we recruit from the community in which we're doing our work. So we have staff who are very diverse and have lived experience. And to me, that is really critical in informing our strategies for resiliency and learning from what it means to be a human being in our nation experiencing accumulated trauma, multi-generational poverty, economic, racial, social injustice. So it's kind of overwhelming, but it's all connected, and we may be able to talk a little bit about that. So thank you.
So Peggy, let's jump in and talk about, so given all that you do, how does your organization, in your view, and Denise, please also jump in, enact organizational wellness, or some of the principles that we talked about and that are highlighted in the guide?
Sure. When I came to Primavera, which was a little over 18 years ago, one of the things that excited me was that there was a group of staff from throughout the organization working on organizational guiding principles. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. It's not a top down, it's a bottom up, and inside out, outside in. And so the staff developed, a team of folks developed them, took them back to all staff and went through various iterations. But we really used those once they were approved by the organization, by the staff of the organization. We continue to use them as teaching, as coaching, as in our supervision, in holding ourselves accountable. They are integrity, respect, compassion, accountability, and leadership. And those are really critical. As the CEO, I believe that everyone is a leader in the organization. Every single person, don't care what you're doing, you are a leader. And your voice matters. And the expectation is that you bring your voice forward and bring critique, bring ideas, bring suggestions. Those are critical pieces. And I think the third one is having an employee assistance program that the organization pays for. And, you know, I don't always get excited about bills going up, like from our vendor, but I will say that after our first year of COVID, our EAP went way up, and I celebrated that, because what does that mean? It means folks are using it. But I think Denise has some really great strategies and ideas on the ground of, you know, how to work with staff around that. Denise?
Right. One of the good things for myself is that I actually, you know, had direct care. Prior to becoming a program manager, I was a case manager. So knowing what staff are actually going through, you know, dealing with our participants, doing that one-on-one, dealing with all the stress, and now becoming a program manager, that's helped me transition to understand what the staff are going through and help them, you know, to understand where trainings that needed, that guidance that's needed, and also not only understand what kind of supervisor I want to be, but what kind of supervisor our program needs. And like Peggy stated, you know, with our guiding principles, that's one of the things we're always encouraging and reminding each other of, not only with my group, you know, my team, but even with our supervisors, our program managers meetings. That's something we go through, you know, we start our meetings with that, just reading each one of them and reminding each other what they are. And then we kind of elaborate on what our guiding principles are. And we'll talk about, you know, is there an example or is there something we've seen happen in the last couple of weeks where we can talk about, or is there somewhere around that area that we're having an issue with? And if we are, then we talk about it, come up with a plan and how can we get around it. If it's something that's, you know, positive, that's great that we're encouraging each other with that. But like I said, you know, for me being, you know, direct care before and now a program manager, that's a definite positive for myself, you know, and my team, to understand what they're going through, what the concerns or issues are, and making sure I'm, you know, I'm seeing that self-care and noticing when there is burnout and addressing it right away.
So you've talked about some key things for you all, principles, really noticing that staff are using the resources, incorporating it into daily practice, and having had that perspective before. What would you say are two or three other key things, if you had to narrow it down to two or three, that are most important in promoting organizational wellness? Maybe Denise, we can start with you and then we'll go back to Peggy.
Sure. I think for me, it's getting to know my staff, not only professionally, but personally. Everybody has, you know, things going on outside of work. And so for them to share, you know, those things with me, that to me, I feel is building trust with them. And that helps me know what exactly the needs are. I start doing that during our, you know, our one-on-ones, our supervisions. My first question is, how are you doing? You know, we don't want to start off talking about our caseload because we know that can take up our whole supervision. But I want them to know that I do care about them and their well-being is my number one priority. So we want to focus on that. If there's any, you know, issues, concerns, there's stress, we want to make sure we're addressing that and coming up with a plan to avoid that burnout. We don't want to get it to burnout and then address that. And sometimes staff don't realize that's what's happening. You know, they're not noticing it within themselves. They're just doing the job and want to keep pushing and pushing, but if we see it ourselves and we get to know our staff, we can bring it to their attention and say, hey, I'm noticing there's an increase in amount of stress, there's tension, what's going on? And come up with a plan to come out of that, you know, and try to alleviate some of that.
I would say, in addition to what Denise said, I really believe strongly in seeking to understand. So I really try to make sure that I'm aware of my own assumptions. I definitely have some assumptions, so I need to be aware of it. And I also have bias. So to understand my own bias, I need to be have a self-awareness of my own white privilege, of the fact that, you know, I've had trauma in my life, but I'm very privileged. And I'm heterosexual, and I've had equity of opportunity throughout my life. So I need to understand my privilege when I'm seeking to understand. So I think that's one really important piece. You know, as an organization, we really try to apply systems thinking. You know, we understand that poverty and marginalization and injustice are experienced in relationship to race, class, gender, sex, sexual identity, all that systemic oppression. And so we have to understand that, because what I see sometimes is people either take things personally or assume all the stress and injustice onto themselves. And we have to understand, no, it's related to a system, and that our strategies have to address the issues that are related to those unjust systems, right? We can do the best we can do, but if we're doing that in the context of an unjust US social and economic and racial injustice system, then it's almost going to feel like we're just spinning. So that's really, really important. And then the other piece I'll add, and then Liz, I want you to challenge me on that.
Well, I just wanted to ask how you enact that in your organization, Peggy.
That's great. So let me just give a real example. Right after the candidate who won president in 2016, whose name shall not be named, he won the election in 2016. We had an all-staff meeting, and at that time, and you know, I really encourage people, bring your voice forward, challenge. And it doesn't happen as much as I'd like, but in that meeting of all of our staff, a couple of people said, look, we see violence going up. It's impacting immigrants, hatred, LGBTQIA violence, obviously ongoing injustice and the violence of poverty. It's really rising. What are we as an organization going to do about it? And, you know, it's us, it's ourselves, but it's also our program participants, our tenants, and the neighborhoods, the communities with whom we work. So I said, that's a great question. We're going to do this together. We're going to figure it out together. And so we developed an initiative we call Race, Equity, Decolonization, Inclusion. And we created a staff team, diverse staff team. We developed curriculum. One of our staff, who happens to be a grant writer, also has expertise in training around anti-oppression. And so we started that out in you know, right after the election, and we're still working through that. We have a newsletter. So, you know, we're trying to create a safe place for that diversity, but also engage these really hard issues and connect them to our work.
So in engaging those really hard issues, is that something that then comes from Peggy down, or is it something that is all staff are engaged in that empowers them in a way that has them be able to see their work and their lives in connection in the context with these larger issues?
We haven't arrived yet, I'll say that. It's an ongoing process. Clearly, it's a passion of mine, but it can't be about me, right? I mean, really, it has to be about the organization. So the fact that we have this team working together, and I've actually stopped kind of attending. They're doing that work. They're taking it out. They've created their own newsletter. Is everybody comfortable? No, not at all. But what's really important is a safe place, right? a safe place for people to engage and challenge each other around the diverse issues. And then using it as a strategy for ongoing training and self-awareness and learning in the context of the larger community.
Thanks for that, Peggy. Denise, last question I think goes to you. What recommendations do you have for other supervisors, for other organizations who are working to promote resiliency of their staff?
You know, as I stated before, I think my biggest thing is getting to know your staff. Again, not only professionally, personally, if you can, and if they're willing to share that. I think that helps with knowing, you know, when they're having trouble in a certain area. If you don't know what's happening with them professionally or personally, it's kind of hard to understand and guide. Also being there, being available for them. You know, my biggest thing, and I'm constantly reminding my staff, is I have that open door policy. You know, if you have a question, if you need some type of training, let me know. And, you know, if I'm asking questions, how are you doing? Are you understanding this? Are you doing with your caseload? If you're telling me I'm okay, that's exactly what I'm going to think. But, you know, I really need you to be open with me as well, because, of course, nobody can read minds. You know, I could only see what's happening, but unless you're actually sharing it with me and telling me your concerns or certain areas we need help with, I can't do anything. So, but the good thing with staff is that they're pretty open. You know, they know my door's open. I'm one that, and if I can, I'll drop it if I can move away from the care that they need. If for any reason I'm not available, I'm letting them know. Is it something that can wait a minute? Is it something that maybe I can schedule a time for us to sit one-on-one, you know, and explaining to them, not that I don't want to help you right now, but hey, I'm in the middle of something. Is it something that can wait? Is it an emergency? And that's exactly what I do, you know, and I'll take a look at our calendars and schedule a time for us to sit down, so that way they have my 100% focus and I'm able to provide the guidance that they need.
Actually, I do have time for one more question, sorry, and it comes back to you, Peggy. What do you think is the biggest challenge? And maybe this also relates to recommendations that you would have for other organizations. What's the area in which Primavera you think is still striving? That's a challenge that you would have a recommendation for.
There's too many, but let me give a couple. One is, you know, we're in an ecosystem, and that means change. Change is always happening. And I know staff get real afraid of change. I, on the other hand, love change. So I have to I tell my staff, rein me in. If you need to rein me in, you have to do it, because I may not rein myself in, because I don't think I need to be reined in. So, but I think, you know, for me, what's really, really important also is embracing dissatisfaction. So I actually love dissatisfaction, which is maybe weird, but really, if we don't embrace, instead of walking away or being afraid of dissatisfaction, we embrace it, because that means people care, they're passionate. If they're upset, it means they really care about something. And so, you know, use that. Change means dissatisfaction times vision, because everybody in this organization has a vision of making a difference, of bringing equity of opportunity. So don't have to convince folks choose to be here, but then you have to put together a process when there is that dissatisfaction or disagreement. You know, we have to embrace it, and it's okay to do that. And I think that's a place that people don't always feel safe. And so I think from the top, I mean, I don't see myself as the top, but I know I am in terms of my title and responsibility and owning the risk, right? I want to be able to be human, be fully human. And I want people to challenge me in my humanity. And I want us to be, you know, to create that safe place, because if we can't do that, then we're not going to restore our health and well-being, right? We live in a world that's fractured, that's traumatic. And we need to develop those skills, whether in our organization or in our community or, you know, across our nation.
Thanks, Peggy. I know that there was a couple of questions in the Q&A that we didn't get to, and Laura's going to talk us through our opportunity to answer some of those questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Peggy and to Denise, from the Primavera Foundation. Your perspectives from the field are so valuable, and we've been getting comments coming through, and people are so appreciative of them. I'm really excited to say that Peggy, Denise, Liz, and I will all be back here again next Thursday to continue this conversation around helping our supervisors to support staff and to build their resilience. So we will certainly have a lot of time to really talk with you all and engage in discussion, to answer your questions during this office hours next week on July 22nd from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to put a link in the chat, and there it is right there for you to register. So please join us. Please register for the event. If you have questions that come to mind, comments you want us to make, please go ahead and put that as part of your registration, and we'll certainly get to it. And Jen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you all so much. This has been fantastic information. A lot of, thoughts even going through my head about how we can, do things differently, in all the organizations and all the work that we do. So I just appreciate you sharing your expertise, and I'm excited for those of you to join us next week to dive deeper through the office hours and get more questions answered. So we have the link to the evaluation and certificate of participation if you'd like that. And in the spirit of wellness and resiliency, we are going to end a few minutes early and give you back a few minutes before your next meeting to think up, questions for next time, process the information, and really see how you could use it in your work. So thank you so much to the team from the National Council for Mental Wellbeing and for everyone for joining us today. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.